Eli didn't notice it the first time his sister said it, or the second. It was a strange little sentence, something you'd expect from an old radio drama. The air feels different today, don't you think? At first, he thought nothing of it. People repeat themselves sometimes, especially when they're tired or distracted. But when he heard his neighbor, Mrs. Rourke, say the exact same words 2 days later, same cadence, same odd upward inflection on different, he paused mid-step. It wasn't just the words. It was the way their eyes seemed to still afterward, as though they were waiting for some kind of response. And when he heard his boss mutter it under his breath in the break room, staring out the window at the cloudless sky, Eli felt something cold coil in his stomach. 3 people. Same words. Same pause. And now, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were all watching him a little too closely. It was Friday night when Eli decided to shake off the creeping unease. He told himself it was nothing, just a coincidence, like hearing the same song on the radio twice in one day. His friend Mark invited him over for beers and a game. Familiar, comfortable, normal. Except, halfway through their conversation, Eli noticed something. Mark's smile. It wasn't wrong exactly. His teeth were there, his lips moved, but it lingered too long. Not just a beat or two, but long enough that it felt posed, like a photograph someone forgot to stop taking. And then, like a badly looped video, it reset. Lips parting again in the exact same way, eyes crinkling in the same corners. Eli blinked, and it was gone. You okay, man? Mark asked, tilting his head in a motion just a bit too precise, too clean. Eli nodded, but his stomach nodded. The cold coil inside him was tightening. Because when Eli left, he saw Mark's reflection in the living room window, still smiling. The next morning, Eli stopped by his parents' house. His mother greeted him at the door with her usual warmth, or at least, what looked like warmth. She hugged him, but there was a delay. Half a second too long between his arms going around her and hers responding. Half a second where she just stood there. He pulled back, searching her face. Her eyes didn't quite match the smile. Over coffee, she asked about his job, about his apartment, about whether he'd been sleeping well. But every so often, she would pause, mid-sentence, like a buffering video. Then she'd pick up exactly where she left off, word for word, same tone, as if nothing had happened. It was when his father came in that Eli's hand tightened on his mug. His dad walked to the table, sat down, and without looking at either of them, said, "The air feels different today, don't you think?" Eli's mother smiled, the same smile Mark had worn the night before. The coffee in his stomach felt suddenly heavier. Eli tried to convince himself it was all in his head. A phrase, a smile, a pause. Nothing concrete, nothing worth calling insane over. That night, he went to a small get-together at his friend Anna's apartment. 6 people, all familiar faces. He told himself it was the perfect chance to reset, to prove his paranoia wrong. At first, everything was fine. Music in the background. Laughter. The smell of garlic bread. Then Anna dropped her wine glass. It didn't shatter. It bounced once, rolled a little, and came to rest at her feet. She stared at it for several seconds, utterly still, before bending down, slowly, unnaturally slowly, to pick it up. And then, as she rose, she said it. "The air feels different today, don't you think?" The man on the couch across from Eli repeated it. Word for word. Same inflection. Same timing. Then Anna said it again. 3 voices, same phrase, in perfect unison. Eli stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. Everyone turned toward him at exactly the same angle. Eli muttered something about needing air and backed toward the door. Nobody moved to stop him. They just kept looking. He stepped into the hallway, heart pounding, and forced himself to breathe. Maybe it was some weird inside joke. Maybe. A flicker of movement caught his eye. Through the thin crack where Anna's door hadn't quite closed, he saw them. All of them. Frozen. Not just still, locked. Heads slightly tilted. Eyes unblinking. And then their faces began to change. Not entirely, just subtle shifts, like badly loaded textures in a video game. A jaw that shortened, then snapped back. Skin color rippling a shade too pale, then too red. For half a second, one man's eyes blinked sideways, like a lizard's. Eli stumbled back, and the hinge creaked. Every head in the room snapped toward the crack in the door, perfectly in sync. Eli didn't remember running down the stairs, but suddenly he was in his car, keys shaking in his hand. He locked the doors, started the engine, and drove. Halfway home, he called his sister. She'd always been his anchor. She'd tell him he was overreacting, talk him down. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Eli," she said, voice calm. Too calm. "The air feels different today, don't you think?" His throat went dry. He didn't answer. There was a long pause, and then something strange. The faint sound of others in the background, whispering, but not in English. Not in any language he recognized. Sharp clicks and low, warbling tones. "Eli," she said again, but this time her voice doubled, like two recordings playing a millisecond apart. He hung up. At the next red light, he glanced in the mirror and saw a dark sedan following, its headlights perfectly aligned with his. Eli didn't try to lose the car. He just drove faster, praying it was all coincidence, that whoever was behind him just happened to be going the same way. But when he pulled into his driveway, the sedan slowed and then continued past, disappearing into the dark. Relief hit him so hard his knees felt weak. Until he opened his front door. The living room light was on. He hadn't left it that way. On the coffee table sat a single sheet of paper. No handwriting, no markings, just a printed image, a grainy black and white photo of him sleeping in his bed. He stared at it, pulse hammering, when he heard the sound. A faint ticking. Not from a clock, but from the kitchen. Tick, tick, tick. He stepped closer, and the sound stopped. And then, from the shadows, his mother's voice. "The air feels different today, don't you think?" Eli froze in the kitchen doorway. His mother stood by the sink, hands resting on the counter. She didn't turn to face him. The ticking started again. Louder now. Not a clock, something inside her throat, inhumanly rhythmic. "Mom," he said, barely above a whisper. She turned her head just enough for him to see her eyes. They weren't his mother's eyes. The pupils were too wide, the irises ringed with a faint, metallic sheen. And they didn't focus. They scanned, flickering side to side like a camera lens searching for signal. He stepped back. "You're not." The sound cut him off. Not a growl, not a scream. Something electronic, a burst of sharp static, like a detuned radio cranked to maximum volume. She began to walk toward him, each step perfectly even, the ticking in her throat syncing with her footfalls. Eli ran. Eli bolted up the stairs, two at a time, slamming his bedroom door behind him. He locked it, shoved his dresser against it, and pressed his ear to the wood. Silence. Then, faintly, the ticking again, moving away. A door creaked open somewhere below. And then he heard it. Not voices. Signals. A rapid stutter of sounds. Clicks, hums, pulses, so fast and complex they made his teeth ache. It wasn't speech meant for human ears. He crept to the window and peered out. The dark sedan was back, parked at the curb. Two figures stood beside it, tall and unnervingly still. From downstairs, his mother's voice called out. "The air feels different today, don't you think?" But this time, it wasn't alone. At least 6 other voices, deep, metallic, perfectly synchronized, repeated the phrase from somewhere inside his house. The synchronized voices rose and fell in unison, vibrating through the walls. Eli's pulse hammered so loudly he could barely hear himself think. He glanced at the dresser blocking the door. If he tried to escape through the front, he'd have to pass them. Not an option. The window, then. He shoved it open, but stopped cold. Both figures from the sedan now stood directly in his yard, faces tilted upward, eyes glinting faintly in the dark. He backed away, scanning the room. The attic hatch. No, too obvious. Then he remembered. The old cellar door in the kitchen floor, hidden under a rug. His mother had always told him never to go down there. He climbed out onto the roof, slid down the side of the house, and crept toward the back door, praying the shadows would hide him. Inside, the voices had stopped. The kitchen was dark, except for a faint, pulsing blue glow coming from the cracks in the cellar door. Eli pulled the rug back. The glow bled across the floorboards like liquid moonlight. He gripped the old iron ring and lifted. The hinges groaned. A cold draft hit him, sharp, metallic, almost sterile. The stairs led into a narrow chamber, the walls lined with strange, glistening panels. Thin cables snaked along the floor, pulsing faintly with light, converging in the center of the room. There, suspended in a web of wires, was a shape. It was him, or something that looked like him. Pale, unmoving, eyes closed, a faint mist of breath escaping its lips in mechanical rhythm. Eli's stomach turned. This wasn't a photograph, a video, a mannequin. This was alive. Footsteps creaked above him. And then, his own voice, from somewhere in the darkness behind the duplicate. The air feels different today, don't you think? Eli's breath came shallow, ragged. The cables shivered as if reacting to him, their lights pulsing faster. Then the duplicate opened its eyes. They were his eyes, but colder, silver threaded through the irises like cracks in glass. Its lips moved, perfectly mimicking his tone. The air feels different today, don't you think? Behind it, something stepped forward from the shadows. Another figure, identical to him in every detail except for the way it moved. Each gesture too deliberate, too perfect. Both of them stared at him. The second one smiled, but the smile didn't reach its eyes. Eli, it said, you've been observed. From above, the sound of synchronized footsteps drew closer to the cellar door. Eli stumbled backward, hitting the cellar wall. The two doubles moved toward him in perfect sync, each step echoing like a metronome in the tight space. Above, the kitchen door slammed shut. Heavy bolts slid into place. You've seen too much, one of them said, his voice, but stripped of emotion. The other tilted its head, studying him like an insect under glass. Containment is required. Eli's eyes darted to the far corner of the cellar. A narrow ventilation grate, small, but maybe enough to crawl through. The doubles moved faster now, cables whipping from the walls like tendrils. One brushed his arm and a shock of cold surged through his skin, numbing it instantly. He threw himself toward the grate, kicking it loose, the metal clattering to the floor. Behind him, their voices merged into a single, layered chorus. The air feels different today, don't you think? And then, they lunged. Eli dove into the vent, just as the cables snapped shut where his legs had been. The metal tunnel was tight, the air stale and hot, every scrape of his elbows echoing in the dark. Behind him, something was following. Not crawling, sliding. A wet, mechanical slither that made the walls vibrate. He pushed forward faster, ignoring the pain in his knees, until the vent split into two paths. One led upward toward faint moonlight, the other down into deeper shadow. A whisper drifted from the darkness below, his own voice, calm and steady. The air feels different today, don't you think? The sound came closer. Too close. Eli took the upward path, kicking until his hands found an opening. He shoved the grate out and tumbled into his backyard, gasping under the cold night sky. Then he froze. The dark sedan was parked at the back fence. All four doors hung open, and in the driver's seat was him. The other Eli sat perfectly still, hands resting on the wheel, eyes fixed straight ahead. The cabin light from the open door made his skin look too smooth, almost synthetic. Eli's first instinct was to run, but something about the stillness, about seeing himself there, pulled him forward. He took a step. The driver turned his head slowly, mechanically, until their eyes met. Silver filaments flickered deep in the pupils. I'm not here for you, the driver said in Eli's voice, though the lips moved a fraction out of sync. I'm here to bring you back. From behind the sedan, three more figures emerged. Two of them people Eli knew, his boss and his neighbor, their expressions blank. The third was a stranger, tall, with a posture so rigid it seemed sculpted. They began walking toward him, every step perfectly timed with one another. The driver reached for the passenger door handle. Get in. Eli shook his head. I'm not going anywhere with you. The driver tilted his head, an uncanny echo of Mark's perfect, too precise motion. You don't understand what's outside the perimeter. I don't care. The driver's eyes flickered, silver bleeding into black. Then containment will be enforced. The three figures advanced, footsteps in absolute unison. Eli backed away toward the tree line at the edge of his yard. When they broke into a run, so did he. Branches whipped at his face as he pushed into the woods, the sound of synchronized pursuit crashing behind him. No shouts, no breathing, just the relentless thud of many feet hitting the earth in perfect rhythm. Somewhere to his left, a voice, his own, called out. The air feels different today, don't you think? And then it was answered by dozens of others, all around him. Eli burst through a thicket, branches tearing at his arms, and stumbled into a shallow clearing. For a moment, he thought he'd lost them. Then the trees around him moved. Figures stepped out from between the trunks, emerging one by one. Some were people he knew, Anna, Mrs. Rourke, his sister. Others were strangers. All of them wore the same vacant expression, their eyes catching faint moonlight like polished metal. They formed a ring around him, perfectly spaced, perfectly still. And then they spoke. Not in English, not at first. A rapid-fire sequence of clicks, hums, and chirps that seemed to pass through the group like a wave. Finally, in unison, every voice said, "The air feels different today, don't you think?" Eli turned in place, counting. 1, 2, 3. By the time he reached 40, he stopped. There were more, many more, watching from deeper in the woods. They didn't move at first, just stared, unblinking, the silver in their eyes catching the moonlight. Eli's breath clouded in the cold night air. Then, from somewhere deep in the ring, a gap opened. No one stepped forward to block it. The path was narrow, leading into a darker stretch of forest where the moonlight barely touched. It felt wrong. It felt planned. But the circle was tightening, inch by inch. He took the chance. The moment he crossed the threshold of the gap, the sound changed. The voices behind him dropped the English words entirely, erupting into the alien clicks and warbles, faster, sharper, urgent. Something moved in the darkness ahead, matching his speed. Not chasing, escorting. When the trees thinned, he found himself staring at a road he didn't recognize, straight and empty, stretching endlessly in both directions. At the far end, a single headlight approached. The beam cut through the dark, growing brighter, but the vehicle made no sound. No rumble of an engine. No crunch of tires on gravel. Just silence, except for the faint hum that seemed to buzz in his bones. Eli stepped back toward the trees. The headlights swelled into two, blinding white, and then the vehicle emerged. A black van. Its surface impossibly smooth, no seams or handles, just a single pane of tinted glass across the front. It stopped inches from him. The glass darkened, and a figure appeared inside. His own face stared back at him. But this one was different. Older. Eyes lined with exhaustion. A faint scar cutting through one eyebrow. The older Eli leaned forward, lips barely moving. "You're not supposed to be here." From behind, the voices in the forest rose again. "The air feels different today, don't you think?" The older Eli's gaze flicked toward the trees. "Get in. Now, before they overwrite you." Eli hesitated at the van's open door. The older version of himself didn't look impatient. He looked desperate. "You think they're replacing you," he said. "You're wrong. They're reverting you." "What?" "They've been here longer than you've been alive. Everyone you know, your family, your friends, they're not disguises. They're the originals. You're the copy. I'm the one who made you." Eli's chest tightened. "No, I built you to pass among them, to survive in the perimeter. But you started noticing the patterns. That means the fail-safes are breaking down. Once they see you figured it out, they'll strip you back to baseline." The forest went silent. Older Eli's voice dropped. "You think you're running from them. But really, you're running from what you'll turn back into." Behind them, the figures emerged from the trees, eyes glowing faintly silver, their steps perfectly synchronized. Eli looked from them to the man in the van, his creator. "Get in," the older Eli said again. "This is your only chance to stay human."